Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Cobus Rossouw, past president, SAPICS. We've got a hybrid session now. We're going to start off with Trisha Long from the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, telling us about their story about a visibility and analytics network that we've learned to call control towers, and it doesn't really matter what you call these things, but essentially introducing a panel discussion that I will moderate with a few other experts. We'll call them onto the stage when they don't have to, including myself, wring our necks, and essentially talking about how we best get insights from control towers. So thanks for joining us. We hope to also have some time towards the end for your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, there we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Trisha Long. As Cobus said, I'm from the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, and I'm with the Global Family Planning Visibility and Analytics Network. It's our pleasure to be here today. See if it works. So everybody likes to hear a story, so we're going to start with a story. This one is a picture you might be familiar with, especially in this part of the world. It's March 19th, 2019, and Cyclone Idai comes through, wipes out the port of Beira, devastates the city. Warehouses that are a lifeline for essential health products in Africa are completely damaged, and 86,000 tons of products are stalled outside the port, including some key family planning products. The impact of this disaster is being felt over 1,000 miles away in Malawi, where the Central Medical Store is waiting for an important shipment of contraceptive supplies that was delayed by the storm. In the past, this kind of delay could have caused stockouts at facilities in Malawi. Stockouts of things like condoms, contraceptive pills, contraceptive implants can mean the difference between a woman having the choice to take care of her own health and that of her family or not. But Malawi participates in the Global Family Planning Visibility and Analytics Network, a global supply chain network that we call the VAN. Thanks to their participation in the VAN, they were able to see the delay of their shipment at the port in Mozambique and begin to redistribute the stock from their facilities that had plenty to those that did not have enough in order to weather this disruption. The pandemic has taught us that we live in a global marketplace with a complex supply chain ecosystem. The VAN was put in place pre-pandemic, and as this example is showing us, it's already helping supply chain players to see where their products are and stay resilient in the face of disruptions and geopolitical shifts. How's the VAN doing this, and what lessons can we share with you? The supply chain disruption that we all faced globally during the pandemic is something that our community, the reproductive health community, has dealt with for years. We're perennially faced with insufficient supply, strong demand, and regular disruptions. We've had to learn to be resilient because it means the difference between life and death. A prerequisite to increase supply is visibility into global supply chains so that teams can improve their performance. Put simply, you can't manage what you can't see. Strengthening this visibility is hard. Our supply chain ecosystem is complex, with trading partners spread throughout the world. Throughout a product's journey through this ecosystem, people need to see where it is in order to answer questions like, how much should I buy, and when is my product going to arrive? Insufficient, incorrect, or mislabeled data will send inaccurate messages through the supply chain, resulting in stockouts, overstocks, expiration, and ultimately clients with empty hands. So the VAN's vision was put in place to respond to the complexity of this ecosystem and our desire to work together to better aggregate, share, and align country demand data with production, procurement, and funding to avoid stock imbalances and maximize our limited resources. The VAN helps its members understand the data in the context of the broader global supply chain, providing visibility into each step along the way. The foundation of this chain is data. It's what allows our supply chain players to see products anywhere on their journey. And data standards ensure that each player has access to the same accurate information. The van aims to resolve supply chain issues by allowing the right supply chain players to see the right data at the right time. Countries are at the heart of the ecosystem for reproductive health supplies, and thus they're at the heart of the van. Countries are where inbound products from manufacturers and shippers feed into those in-country supply chains all the way down to the last mile that the prior presentation talked about. The van helps connect countries to their global partners and vice versa, with the aim of improving the effectiveness of supply chain management processes for all of them. And in this way, the van is purpose-built to help us weather ecosystem shocks, such as COVID. But resiliency is more than just visibility. It's about building trust to respond to changing conditions and ensuring flexibility across a whole range of ecosystem players. It's not about one organization, but about a multilateral partnership across manufacturers, freight forwarders, distributors, procurers, and country governments. The van is a community initiative, and we like to think of it as a multi-enterprise supply chain business network that must be hosted by a trusted, neutral convening partner. And in our community, that partner is the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition. The coalition is focused on enabling countries to ensure they can access and use affordable and high-quality reproductive health supplies. As a neutral convening partner, the coalition brings the community together to identify and collaborate on innovative supply solutions for our commodity concerns. More than 500 members, including many ministries of health, work together via various working groups and task forces in order to share data and facilitate informed decision-making. And in 2016, the members of our community asked the coalition to manage the implementation of the van, knowing that we could leverage our neutral convening power to create a transformative network. So today, the van is a growing network with a control tower for visibility. The number of organizations using it has grown from 15 in 2020 to well over 100 today, and 35 of those are country governments. There are 12 analysts who function like the air traffic controllers in a control tower. And I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, we were talking about what does control tower mean, and in this case I want you to think of an airport. So if you were thinking of something different, we're thinking about an airport and helping the planes land and take off in sequence with one another in a manner that's safe and efficient. The analysts and the van users are able to track over 7,500 shipments, 5,500 orders, for 68 products in over 130 countries to make decisions. So previously, our supply chain data were analyzed in separate tools. Some of those tools were Excel spreadsheets, some of them were purpose-built. They didn't communicate with one another, and they had processes that sometimes clashed and sometimes duplicated processes along the way. Now all of these tools, the processes and the data, have been integrated into the van. So what is the value of having a scaled control tower with growing use? What's the impact? We're going to have two examples, both of which are related to disruption and resilience in the face of disruption. In 2021, the UK government announced a $6.3 billion cut in its international development aid. And this decision impacted multiple partners in the reproductive health community and set off a tailspin of ever-widening funding shortfalls. By tapping our convening capacity and our ability to put to effective use critical data sources, the donor community mobilized an additional $26.3 million in new procurements and product donations, helping to forestall some of those issues that were created by the funding cut and making it possible to avert 2 million unintended pregnancies. We'll talk about disruptions from COVID-19 as well. The pandemic caused disruptions to both manufacturer-committed capacities and the flow of logistics. Our community used the van to find resiliency opportunities, such as maximizing the use of transfers. And this is where one partner or entity can share excess stock with another that doesn't have enough. Sometimes we can see the possibility of a shortage or an overstock before it happens. And in this case, we can make a change before that supply ever reaches the port. So an example of that is during COVID, we had a shipment of $1 million worth of product that was intended for Nigeria, but Nigeria's ports were closed. So the Nigerian government, which is a member of the VAN, consulted the VAN and determined that they had enough supply of that particular product. So the decision was taken to divert that shipment to Zambia, which was facing a shortage. Without this information, that shipment might have carried on to Nigeria, got stuck at the port, and accrued daily charges, and wasted the shelf life of that $1 million of product. Meanwhile, Zambia would have had shortages, potentially a stockout. So this slide just shows the impact of using the VAN to respond to supply concerns and help countries manage under and overstock situations, ensure financing compatibility, and balance supply across countries. Between 2020 and 2023, the VAN helped procurers mobilize and allocate more than $109 million in new orders for our member countries, avoided waste by supporting $5.3 million worth of canceled, postponed, and transferred orders, and helped expedite 98 orders to mitigate shortages. So increasing visibility across a growing network is challenging, and I'd like to tell you some of the things that we've learned along the way. This quote from Gartner spotlights the very thing that makes the VANs work really hard. Getting people to share data, work together, and make mutual decisions is tricky, especially when they're working across multiple supply chains. But we also know, and this was highlighted in our last presentation in this room, that we can't do things alone when challenges are this big. Our success comes in how we partner to build strong collaborative networks that enable decisions with less effort. The barrier to scale for these kinds of networks is the partnerships needed to onboard new members, users, and data together in a routine and quality fashion. So 3 fundamental lessons to share with you from our startup phase. First, these types of networks start with people. Their success depends on their relevancy to different players, and so we focused our efforts on how the VAN network can help people in our community with the challenges they face every day in their life and work. Second, our network is challenging because it's not internal to one company or one supply chain trying to link itself up to its suppliers. Rather, it's linking across many different countries, companies, organizations. And third, these types of networks don't start and succeed overnight. They must consistently identify growth opportunities and go after them while not growing too fast or too slow, kind of like the Goldilocks problem. Remember that Amazon just started as a book-selling company, and the ATM began with only a few banks. So it's good to start small and try to grow your way up. Overall, how will we prepare our partner organizations to be ready to participate in this network? So you may all be familiar with the change management framework of people, process, and technology, and that's very well known. In our multi-enterprise network, we need to add a 4th dimension, and that is policy. People are our first element, that's our user community, and we systematize onboarding them so that helps everyone have a common understanding of what we do. Our process, we call our drum beat. So you can think of somebody pounding on a drum with a routine cadence. That's the way we systematize and synchronize the flow of our work together and our data. Tools are our platforms, our technologies, that we use to maximize people's time and minimize the level of effort they have to use to make decisions. And finally, policy is our governance structure, including how we facilitate data sharing and create trust among partners. So the VAN's differentiator compared to others is how we built these partnerships to onboard our new members, processes, and data. And I'm going to share 4 more lessons learned that we've learned in this onboarding. First, the VAN is made up of such a heterogeneous group of supply chain players, and onboarding them requires a neutral, central governance structure that establishes a central decision-making guideline across the community and promotes working together. We all feel the pain when things aren't going well, and so we try to make sure everyone shares the gains when we make progress. If change management in one organization is hard, it's especially hard to get everyone to agree across multiple organizations. Working together, a drumbeat or an agreed cadence helps to align the flow of the data with the users that need to make decisions using it. Otherwise, different types of data would be flowing through the system at different times and could create confusion. It would be very easy to misinterpret what you were seeing, for example, if you were trying to take one piece of data reported quarterly from a country, match it up with another piece of data that's reported monthly, and use that on a different type of time frame to make a decision. You might not trust that the data is correct at the time that you need it because of this lack of synchronization. So that drumbeat standardizes the process of receiving, reviewing, and validating the data needed for decisions to be made. We onboard new members, whether they're countries, manufacturers, or procurers, and link the process of receiving and reviewing that data back to the type of decision that needs to be made using the data and when the data need to be received and cleaned so that they're ready to be used. We establish an agreed calendar and time frame with the people in country that are providing the data or in that organization. Technology is like a treadmill. Once you get started, you can't just stop or what happens. And it's constantly changing too, right? We all know that. In a multi-enterprise network, we have partners changing technology all the time. And that's not change that we control, so we have to be able to work with them in a transparent way to ensure that data keep flowing. It also has a pace. Technology has a pace, right? It needs to be aligned with your process. If we stop in the middle of the flow, we're going to fall off, just like this poor lady on the treadmill here. So you need to start at a manageable flow and figure out how to incrementally increase that flow over time. An example of this would be some of our country partners being able to provide us with near real-time inventory data through a direct connection to their logistics management information systems in country. But if our processes or theirs are not ready to handle that faster cadence of receiving and reviewing the data, we can end up with incorrect information and misinterpretation. Finally, our policy is how we onboard data with technology that promotes sharing. A data sharing framework is critical to a multi-enterprise network, and it's critical, I think, to most networks. The VAN only exists because key supply chain players are providing their data together to make decisions. And if our goal is to be reached, it has to be shared across partners. The VAN resolved the barriers to data sharing by developing a transparent multilateral agreement called our Terms of Use that is based on a robust, role-based data security model. VAN users have to agree to the terms before logging in the platform and using the data, and everyone agrees to the same terms, even if they have different security roles. So this approach is one that can be used by other community members working in multilateral collaboration, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can build on the learnings from the VAN. The lessons learned and our guidance has been written up into a case study, including this legal framework template. It's all available at our website, which is up here. And there's lots more information there. I've also added a post to the chat. Thank you so much.
I'm going to sit down from the outset, otherwise it's going to be up and down. So, Trisha, thank you very much. I didn't indicate that in the prep, but I'm going to start with a question with you. I'm sure there's many questions, but I think my reflection is it's great to hear about a working case study. So thank you very much for that. But my question relates to your lesson 3 that you said take baby steps. Maybe just give us a little bit more information about this journey. Because you've taken many steps to get to this point, and I want to disprove the myth that this is easy. So maybe give us a bit more of how hard this has been.
I think the challenge has been sequencing our growth and making sure that we grow in the right place at the right time. So we have a set of use cases that we've been working toward as we go through time. And there were initially 6 of them. Now that I think there are 13. Some of them were use cases that we absolutely, our community agreed, we have to accomplish this. Some of them were use cases that we called opportunistic. And I think that was a part of the key to being successful, is thinking about, okay, if we could do this, if the conditions were right, what would be the thing we would take advantage of and grow into? And we wrote a use case for that. along the way. We came up with some other opportunistic ones that we hadn't thought of, but the conditions were there. And so having that flexibility to grow in a more organic way, I think was very helpful.
Cool. Thank you very much. We also yesterday saw a presentation on a supply chain control tower at Twinsaver. Very different because it was very comprehensive across all the different functions of an organization. So Mohammed, you presented also a huge challenge, and I think you've shown lots of benefits right down to the bottom line. But maybe my question for you, in terms of the insights, which were actually the most challenging insights to extract from this control tower approach? Where did you get stuck? And I'm asking you that to not just tell us what went well, but it's like, what was really difficult? Because then other people may identify with that.
Thank you, Cobus. Well, I think what comes to mind is two aspects, and I'll touch on the first one, is system integration. A real big challenge on our side. Pretty much the interface that we had was, we put a supercar onto square wheels. And the square wheels being, we had an ERP system which was DOS-based, so everybody knows black screen, green text, and extremely difficult to work with. So that posed a lot of challenges. It took a lot of time in the initial stages of the project. And I guess the finding behind that is you got to start quite early in your data management. I think Trisha alluded to that. It's extremely important. There's a lot of challenges that come with that. I think the second part is around how do you interact with the data with parties that are out of your control. So in the context of the Twinsaver environment, you had the rest of the business, which was sales, planning, etc. Then you had the 4PL run the distribution and the logistics part. So out of control from the 4PL was the sales team, kind of. So obviously we presented large amounts of data at the time, and it does create quite a bit of confusion in terms of where should you concentrate your efforts to. You get some sort of pushback, you're encroaching on my area, etc. So there were some challenges in that area where it was more of a, I would say, a change in mindset, a coaching approach, making stakeholders understand what the data is telling us. And I'll use a good example with regards to what we call transshipments. So these are shipments outside your big area. So in the South African context, we're shipping to far-lying areas across the country, Northern Cape, Bloemfontein, etc. So extremely costly exercise to do within our logistics environment, and considering that from a tissue perspective, that's what we produce, we're pretty much transporting air. And you got to ship these big bulk loads of trucks to customers in outlying areas, where in a few examples, the logistics costs pretty much dilute all of the profit. But in the same context, you've got to understand it from a sales perspective, where we have a national contract. So you might have a national contract with one of your big customers, retailers, and you're obligated to supply to those outlying areas. So it was about both parties understanding each other and coming to a compromise. And in this instance, you pretty much changing the product mix, speaking to the customers, kind of building on bulk loads rather than segmented shipments. And we found a way around it. And in the worst case, actually taking price increases to customers based in these outlying areas. It sounds a bit hard in terms of the approach, but at the end of the day, it kind of, we reach a compromise. Yep.
Thanks very much. I think that's certainly a theme that, there's inconvenient insights sometimes that we learn, in this specific profitability dilemma is something that you have to deal with. Now, if you have a control tower and you get the insights and you actually learn stuff that you didn't necessarily want to deal with. So thanks for that. Dale, the mezzanine journey has also been been one that's evolved over time. It's another great success story. Do you want to tell us more about that and how you've taken that on?
Thanks, Cobus. Yeah, I think, so my name's Dale. I'm a health economist by qualification, so my background is actually pharmaceutical economics, so I ended up in supply chain by accident, like apparently many of us in the room. I think the theme that's come through a lot resonates with the mezzanine story. What do you want the data for? Like, what are you solving for? What's the question you want to answer? Because we like to overcomplicate things as humans, I think, by nature, or some of us are drawn to complexity, and we want to solve for everything at once sometimes. So what you want to solve for will be different if you're moving commodities across the globe on behalf of like many organizations versus moving air, I like that, moving tissues across a country with very different geography, and having a commercial imperative versus not. So if you're not clear about that up front, you're going to build the wrong system, you're going to invest in the wrong places, and you're going to have a really long and painful journey. So being clear about what are you going to, like, what questions you want to answer. And I think we've tried to help customers answer those questions so that we're not building something that's not going to be used. And I think we're really proud of our adoption rate, which is in the high 80s, sustained 80% user adoption rate since sort of 2015. And we think it's a testament to the fact that we know we're just the tech company, and we want to work with the people who know what the right questions are to ask and answer, and who's going to do what with those answers. Because if you're not clear about who's going to use the information to answer that you're getting, then you're going to still ask the wrong questions. So you might be sitting in an ivory tower, not a control tower, hopefully, thinking, oh, well, the question that the facility manager definitely needs to answer is X. And then if you're going to ask the facility manager, they'll have a very different story. So we've had some very difficult lessons where customers have great confidence about what the right questions are and that these are definitely the things we should be solving for. And then when you go out in the field, it's definitely not what the case is. So echoing what you said, I think it's so important to take an agile approach. And just for one use case, so we supported the National Department of Health in South Africa with implementing a really rapid kind of agile response to the COVID vaccine distribution on both the supply chain side and the service delivery side. And within a space of about 2 weeks, we had to get a system up and running that was ready, that could service the need of both where are the commodities in space and time, and how do we match the commodities to where the demand is, and how do we know how much demand the sites can actually service. And there wasn't time to deploy ERPs and like fixed line and all sorts of things. So what are those core data points that you need to be able to service whatever it is you're needing to do, and being very specific about that so that you're not investing tons of money and not just cash, but like people's time and energy. And I mean, yeah, I think there can be huge fatigue if you're not clear from the beginning about what you're wanting to do with it. And just one more example, I think, to the overwhelm about too much data. In 2015, with both the EVDS, the vaccine, and the just supply chain environment, when you get access to live data, if you're used to having the snapshot kind of point in time that we were discussing earlier, I mean, actors don't know what to do with it. They get it's paralysis. It's like, so there's a stock out now. Okay, so what do you want me to do? You want me to get in a car and drive now? Yes. Now, okay, that's a new process. There is no process like that. Where must I go to get the medicines? Who must I call? So if you're going to implement, you have to be ready for the cadence with both the governance and the process. And tech can support that, and it should enable that. But if you don't have those things in place, then you're just going to have chaos, like amplified to, yeah, the next level. So I think, in summary, we're just a tech provider, but we believe tech has a useful role in enabling not just existing processes, but yeah, being clear about what you want to do and then implementing from there. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. I think, Kent, let's go to the other tech provider. And you know, in this sort of realm of you you need to be agile because you don't necessarily know what you don't know, but you have to know. Surely AI is just the answer. You know, you just throw AI at it and then you get all the answers immediately.
AI will fix everything. No, you know, look, I'm a tech zealot. I'm very big on technology and the latest innovations and the bleeding edge of everything, and I promise Dell and I did not coordinate this. But the point she just made is exactly what AI is for. If you don't know this, there were 463 exabytes of data created yesterday. Let me put that in perspective. That's 463 million terabytes of data. Okay, you pay about $10 a month per terabyte. You'd be paying $463 billion per month to store all the world's data. You can't keep up with it. There is no way to keep up with that amount of data. I have 3 children. I can't remember birthdays. I have to have my AI remind me that my son's birthday is tomorrow. So what AI will do is AI will parse data very quickly. It will start socializing your business process to the data in the market, the data you own, the data that's adjacent to you, the data that you haven't seen yet. It will start analyzing and prescribing back to users what the action should be. But it is up to the person. It is up to the person to advise that AI of what to do, because the one thing AI cannot do and will never do is it has no empathy. It has no empathy at all. If I ask the AI what to do with my daughter's baby blanket today, it would say, you have no baby, you are not having a baby, throw the blanket away. But there's empathy to that baby. There's empathy to that blanket. There's a nostalgic point to that. And so humans offer that personality, empathy pace back to AI. And I think that's where the convergence will happen, is as business processes are unfolding, more data is available, they will start to come together. So.
Cool, thanks. I think taking that point about people and how important people are, Mohammed, back to you. You also went through a big education process. You know, you not only in the organization, your partners, your key partner in Hans, but also the third-party partners. How did you deal with this balance of education, getting people to think differently, very differently, and actually getting things done?
Yeah, I guess the approach was different. I think you've got to segregate people across the organization. So the first part was kind of educating the distribution staff. So to give context, our distribution staff were transferred to the 4PL, and then obviously exposed to a whole area of technology. It was completely new to them. Few people hadn't probably seen a graph before, right? Let alone be able to interpret it. So the training approach there was more upskilling people, focusing on the primary development in terms of understanding how to interpret the graphs, basically just educating them on that base understanding. Where the approach for other areas within the business, which was basically planning and sales, quite a higher skill level of people, but when we kind of interfaced with this data on logistics and distribution costs, etc., it was totally new to them. And it was seen as if we're encroaching on their area, similar to what I said earlier. So the context of the training, or I would say the approach of the training, was different. We were speaking to people at a higher skill level, but it was about creating that understanding of how this data actually interacts with your area, and then taking it from that point of view. So varying sets of training complexities. Yeah.
Dale, quickly, we are almost running out of time, but just again, take me into your world, deep into clinics, into where the rubber actually hits the road, where people are have to have access to medicines. Those people, how did you change behavior there? So, and maybe just to be, so for me, it's always this thing is, if you're out of stock, and you have to tell somebody out of stock, but the first response is, well, it's your fault that you're out of stock. How do you, that dilemma?
So I think one of the key things that, obviously in conjunction with National Department of Health and our other partners, we've got a few different projects running, but focusing on the medicines one, if there was a reaction to the signal of zero stock, no blame game, just react. will get you the commodities, you immediately see that there was a spike in adoption because then their data meant something. So that was the one thing. If the data isn't used by somebody that I can interact with and I feel the impact, then like, why am I going to log data or transact on a system or do anything? So if I'm sending signals that the shipment that I received actually was 1 box instead of 5 and nobody ever does anything about it, obviously I'm not going to send any more signals. So making sure that there's a positive reinforcement at that fundamental level. And we've done lots of interesting things about like gamification and peer learning and all the rest of it, and it's great. But basically in the clinical environment, the nurses want to serve their patients, and if you can reduce the effort at that level, and it was also about task shifting. So with the end game being, you don't have to do the ordering if we have your data. We can support you with an advise, push, or inform pull, or whatever you want to call it, depending on where you sit. You don't have to go and do all these things that you don't actually want to be behind the scenes doing. You want to engage with your patients, and then there's more time for the patients. So I think figuring out, again, who are the role players, who are the users, what do they care about, and then making sure that the system or the process and what the feedback matches that so that they're incentivized to do what you want them to do. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. All the consequences of these insights and the technology that we have that's enabling the business. Kent, maybe last point there for you. We've had lots of capture again this year by the healthcare community. Fantastic, because we've learned a lot from there. But quickly, maybe just where other industries, where's control towers having a real impact?
Everywhere. So I think it's the most, next to AI, it might be the most overused word in the industry, a control tower. Everybody's like, what is it? Look, I'll define it from our point of view. Our point of view as a control tower is nothing more than an aggregation of data, people, and workflow, right? Whatever you're solving, that's what you're aggregating together. And I believe that the world is shifting away from single-point control towers into multi-party control towers, where my control tower can connect into Trisha's, can connect into someone else's. The easiest example of that is Uber. Uber is a multi-party, multi-echelon control tower that bridges supply of riders to demand of drivers to financial institutions to traffic patterns of governments. It bridges all that together. That's a good representation of a networked control tower. And so what I see is that, in retail, I see a lot in retail, especially on the inbound side of retail. I see a lot on the outbound side of oil and gas, and I see a lot of variability in militaries. So we run a lot of the military's control towers, and so every bullet, bean, and Band-Aid that needs to deploy in the world has to be deployed secretly. No actor can find out where it is, but it has to be there on time every time. So, yep.
Cool. Thank you very much. Can try to take a question off the floor, but maybe Trisha, at last from you. What would you do differently next time?
Oh, next time. I think one of the things I would love to have done, looking back on it now, is to drive a little bit more of metrics toward those use cases and talk about them a little bit more earlier in the process. Like we did, but I think we could have even done more than that to really say, this is what we were trying to accomplish, here's what we accomplished, here's what's yet to come.
Yeah, great. I think there was other sessions also that said, produce results, measure them, get awareness. So thank you very much. Important insight. Other questions from the floor? We've got Jonathan here at the front. He's close.
So in terms of implementing a supply chain control tower, and you hear all of these people talk about center of excellence and command centers and all this wonderful English, but the control tower itself, in terms of implementing, the way I've always understood it, it's not just the software. It is also the processes behind it and what you're trying to get out. But in terms of the pain points, or how do you determine when to implement the control tower if a perceived notion in the organization is that the delivery patterns are okay, the outcomes is okay? When do you understand that the control tower needs to be implemented, and what are the return on investment type of mindset or discussions do you have with senior management once you've implemented in the short term? Thanks.
Should I?
I have one thought on that, if I may.
Yeah.
So we have a phrase, ride the wave that we're on. So whatever that wave is, use that to start with a process or an intervention. Don't go and find like some esoteric thing that nobody actually cares about and try and implement it for that. Choose the wave that everyone's on and find something to talk about on that and then build from there. I think that's been one of our greatest lessons, yeah.
The only thing I would say is don't wait. Don't wait for it. Don't try to find the perfect answer, the perfect use case, the perfect solution, because your competitor, your agency down the street is already adopting it. And I think everybody's afraid of AI. I'm more afraid of people that aren't thinking about AI and adopting AI in what makes sense to them, because they will be the ones that will be left behind. So I think it's all about find a place to get started, do it simply, have some success early, and then build out from there. So.
Yeah, I concur. Don't wait. The quicker you start it, the faster you realize how much is actually wrong. Yeah.
Absolutely. I will say rather make, fall forward.
Yeah.
I just want to comment on, you've added the people, process, technology, you added policy, and clearly in an industry context that is important. But I think for control towers, for networks, for platforms, it actually applies across everything we do. Because we fall flat of not actually defining the policy. Because we assume, in an organization there is policy. But across organizations there aren't. And policy sounds like something that only governments do, but policy. So I would say, add that to your thinking. But again, yeah, start somewhere. Just start. All right. This thing is very red now, so I think you're supposed to go somewhere else. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.